You know that moment when someone laughs at your vacation choice and you just know they have no idea what they're talking about. That's exactly what happened when I told my travel agent I wanted to spend 2 weeks in Malaysia. She actually laughed, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Malaysia? Really? When Thailand and Bali are right there." And here's the thing, I almost changed my mind right there in her office. I almost let her book me a generic beach resort in Phuket like every other tourist. But something told me to stick with my gut. And what happened next completely changed not just my perspective on travel, but hers too. Because 6 months after my trip, she called me asking for my itinerary. She was booking her own trip to Malaysia. Let me take you back to that conversation in her office because it perfectly captures what most people get wrong about this country. She pulled up her computer and started showing me these glossy brochures of Thailand's floating markets, Bali's rice terraces, Vietnam's Ha Long Bay. All beautiful places, don't get me wrong. But then she pulled up Malaysia and honestly, her presentation was basically just Kuala Lumpur's Petronas Towers and some generic beach photos. She said, "It's fine I guess, but it's kind of just a stopover destination, you know, people don't really go there as a main trip." And I sat there thinking, either I'm about to make a terrible mistake or I'm about to discover something that most travelers are completely missing. The first sign that I made the right choice hit me about 3 hours after landing in Kuala Lumpur. I was wandering through Jalan Alor, this street food paradise in the heart of the city, and I'm surrounded by the most insane mix of cultures I've ever experienced. On my left, there's a Chinese hawker stall grilling satay with flames shooting up into the night sky. On my right, an Indian family is running a banana leaf rice restaurant where they literally serve your entire meal on a fresh banana leaf. Across the street, a Malay woman is making roti canai, flipping this dough in the air like some kind of edible circus performance. And scattered between all of this are Arab restaurants, Thai fusion spots, and Western cafes. All on one street. All coexisting perfectly. And I'm standing there with a plate of char kway wei chow that cost me about $2 thinking, my travel agent has no idea what she's missing. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is something I need you to understand about Malaysia that almost no one talks about. This isn't just a country with diversity, it's a country where diversity is the entire foundation. Malaysia is about 60% Malay, 25% Chinese, 7% Indian, and the rest is this beautiful mix of indigenous tribes and other ethnicities. And somehow, instead of this being a source of conflict like you might see in other countries, they've turned it into their greatest strength. Every religion has official holidays. You've got mosques next to temples next to churches, and nobody bats an eye. The food scene isn't fusion, it's just regular life. And this creates something that I've never experienced anywhere else in my 27 countries of travel. So I spent my first 3 days in Kuala Lumpur, and I kept waiting for it to feel like a typical Southeast Asian capital. Chaotic, sure. But also kind of generic, copying what works in Bangkok or Singapore. Except that never happened. Instead I found myself in neighborhoods that felt completely distinct from each other. I walked through Kampung Baru, this traditional Malay village that somehow survived right in the middle of one of Asia's most modern cities. Wooden houses on stilts, chickens wandering around, the smell of coconut rice cooking for breakfast, and you look up and there's a skyscraper literally 2 blocks away. Then I took a train to Brickfields, also called Little India, and suddenly I'm walking past sari shops, the air smells like curry and incense, and I'm dodging flower vendors selling jasmine garlands for temple offerings. The next day I went to Petaling Street in Chinatown, and I'm watching a traditional Chinese medicine shop operate the exact same way it probably did 100 years ago, with dried herbs and mysterious roots in glass jars, while next door someone's selling the latest smartphones. And here's what struck me about all of this. These aren't tourist attractions. These aren't preserved neighborhoods for visitors to take photos. These are real, functioning communities where people actually live and work. The grandmother selling dumplings doesn't speak English and doesn't care to. The guy at the mosque doesn't expect tourists. They're just living their lives, and you get to witness it if you're respectful enough to step into their world. But I knew I couldn't spend my whole trip in Kuala Lumpur, so I started venturing out, and this is where Malaysia really started to reveal itself to me. I took a bus to the Cameron Highlands, and this place was nothing like what I expected. We're talking about a hill station built by British colonials in the 1920s as an escape from the tropical heat. So you drive up into these mountains, and the temperature drops 20 degrees, and suddenly you're in this landscape of endless tea plantations that look like they belong in England or maybe China, except you're still in Malaysia. I spent a morning walking through the Bo tea plantation, which is one of the largest in Southeast Asia, and there's something surreal about standing in rows of perfectly manicured tea bushes with mist rolling over the hills while knowing you're just a few hours from equatorial beaches. And the thing is, almost no one talks about this side of Malaysia. When people think Southeast Asia, they think tropical. They think beaches and jungle and heat. They don't think about wearing a sweater to stay warm or sipping fresh black tea while overlooking mountains. But that's exactly what makes Malaysia so fascinating. The geographic diversity here is absolutely wild. You've got tropical islands that rival anything in Thailand. You've got mountain highlands that feel like a different continent. You've got some of the oldest rainforests in the world, older than the Amazon. You've got modern cities that compete with Singapore and Tokyo. And you've got traditional villages where life hasn't changed in centuries. All in one country that you can traverse in a few hours by plane or a day or two by bus. After the Cameron Highlands, I made my way to Penang, and oh my god, this island is where I understood why my travel agent's ignorance was so painful. Penang, specifically Georgetown, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it might be the most underrated food destination in the entire world. I know that's a bold claim, but hear me out. Penang is where all those cultural influences I mentioned earlier collided in the most delicious way possible. The Peranakan culture, which is a mix of Chinese and Malay traditions, has its strongest presence here, and the food that came from this mixing is unbelievable. I'm talking about dishes like asam laksa, which is this sour, spicy, fishy noodle soup that sounds terrible but tastes like heaven. Or char kway wei tiao, flat rice noodles fried with shrimp, eggs, bean sprouts, and Chinese sausage in this dark soy sauce that's slightly sweet and deeply savory. I spent entire days in Penang just eating. Not sightseeing, not shopping, just moving from one hawker stall to another, trying things I'd never heard of. Rojak, which is a fruit and vegetable salad with shrimp paste and peanuts. Sendal, this dessert made with shaved ice, coconut milk, palm sugar, and green jelly noodles made from rice flour. Nasi kanda, which is basically rice with your choice of different curries poured all over it. And everything, and I mean everything, was mind-blowing. Not just good, but the kind of good where you take a bite and immediately text everyone you know telling them they need to come here. The kind of good where you're already planning your next meal before you finish your current one. And here's the kicker about all of this food. Malaysia is absurdly affordable. Like, embarrassingly cheap for the quality you're getting. I would eat these elaborate meals, trying 5 or 6 different dishes, and the total bill would be maybe $6 or $7. Maybe 10 if I really went crazy. A fancy dinner in a nice restaurant might cost $20 per person. Compare that to Thailand where tourist prices have inflated dramatically, or Singapore where you'll pay triple, and you start to see why Malaysia is such an incredible value. But nobody talks about this. Everyone assumes that if it's not expensive, it's not worth it. Or they think the cheap stuff is just generic street food when actually, you're eating recipes that have been perfected over generations, using techniques and ingredients that are specific to this region and can't be replicated anywhere else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After Penang, I needed some beach time, so I headed to the Perhentian Islands, and this is where I really started to understand what my travel agent missed. These islands are off the northeast coast, and they're basically what Koh Phi Phi or Boracay used to be before mass tourism destroyed them. Crystal clear turquoise water. Bright white sand beaches. Coral reefs literally 20 feet from shore where you can snorkel and see sea turtles, reef sharks, and tropical fish in numbers that seem impossible. And the best part, there's no Wi-Fi in most places. No cars allowed on the islands. No chain hotels. Just small guest houses, a handful of restaurants, and nature. I spent 5 days there doing basically nothing but snorkeling, reading, and eating fresh grilled fish, and it was exactly what a beach vacation should be but rarely is anymore. No jet skis roaring past you. No beach clubs blasting EDM. No influencers doing photo shoots every 10 feet. Just genuine relaxation. And I kept thinking about how my travel agent tried to send me to some commercialized beach resort where I'd be surrounded by other tourists doing the exact same manufactured experience, when this was right here, untouched and authentic and waiting. From the Perhentians, I made my way to Borneo. And yes, Borneo is part of Malaysia. Most people don't realize this, but Malaysia is split between the peninsula and the eastern states on Borneo Island. I flew into Kota Kinabalu in Sabah, and from there I organized a trip into the rainforest to see orangutans. Not in a zoo, not in some sad rehabilitation center where they're kept in cages, but in the wild, in their natural habitat at the Kinabatangan River. I stayed at this riverside lodge where you sleep to the sounds of the jungle, and at dawn you take a boat down the river looking for wildlife. And I saw orangutans, multiple orangutans, just swinging through the trees, eating fruit, living their lives completely unbothered by human presence. I also saw proboscis monkeys with their ridiculous long noses, pygmy elephants bathing in the river, crocodiles sunning on the banks, and so many species of birds I lost count. This was real jungle experience, real ecotourism where the money actually goes toward conservation and supporting local communities. And it made me realize how much of what we call ecotourism in places like Costa Rica or Ecuador is just greenwashing. Overpriced tours that herd tourists through controlled environments while claiming it's authentic. This felt authentic because it was dangerous enough to feel real but managed well enough to be safe. You're not guaranteed to see orangutans. You might not see elephants. The wildlife does what it wants, and you're just a quiet observer hoping to glimpse something special. And somehow that makes it even more valuable when you do. After Borneo, I went to Malacca, a historic port city on the peninsula that perfectly represents Malaysia's colonial history. The Portuguese colonized it in the 1500s. Then the Dutch took over. Then the British. And each colonial power left its mark on the architecture, the culture, the language. Walking through Malacca feels like walking through a living history book where you can see Dutch buildings painted in that distinctive red, Portuguese fortifications crumbling near the water, British administrative buildings converted into museums, all existing side by side with Chinese shophouses and Malay kampung houses. And again, this isn't some artificial heritage park. People live here, businesses operate here, and history is just part of daily life. My last few days in Malaysia, I went back to Kuala Lumpur, and I found myself seeing the city differently. The first time through, it felt overwhelming and hard to define. But after traveling through the country, I understood that Kuala Lumpur is basically Malaysia condensed into one city. All the diversity, all the contradictions, all the mixing of old and new, traditional and modern, east and west, it's all there compressed into this metropolitan space. And I started appreciating things I'd overlooked before. The way old temples survive in the shadows of new skyscrapers. The way you can get incredibly sophisticated cocktails in rooftop bars or incredible street food from a cart on the corner. The way people switch between languages mid-sentence, speaking Malay and English and Chinese and Tamil all in one conversation. On my last night, I went back to Jalan Alor where this whole revelation started. And I ordered the same char kway teow from the same stall, and it tasted even better because now I understood context. I understood the Chinese influence in the cooking technique, the Malay influence in the spices, the compromise and collaboration required to create something this delicious from different traditions. And I thought about my travel agent sitting in her office, showing people the same generic destinations, never realizing what she was missing. When I got home, I put together this massive photo collection and wrote detailed notes about everything I experienced. And I sent it to her, not to rub it in, but because I genuinely wanted her to know what Malaysia actually offers. And she called me about 3 weeks later and said she'd been looking through my photos every day. She'd been researching the country on her own. She'd been reading food blogs and travel forums. And she admitted she was completely wrong. She said she'd been selling Malaysia short for years because she'd never been there herself, just relied on what brochures and other agents told her. She booked her own trip for 2 weeks later, followed almost my exact itinerary, and when she came back, she became the biggest advocate for Malaysia in her agency. The lesson here isn't really about Malaysia specifically, although obviously I think everyone should go. The lesson is about how we let other people's ignorance shape our choices. How we trust supposed experts who are just repeating conventional wisdom without actually knowing anything. My travel agent laughed because she didn't know better, and I almost let that laugh talk me out of one of the best trips of my life. Malaysia isn't just fine, it isn't just a stopover, it's not just okay compared to its more famous neighbors. It's a revelation if you give it the chance. It's a country that rewards curiosity and punishes assumptions. And now you know what most travelers still don't. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?